In a world where Maitland McDonough, First Lady of Horror, speaks, and you have a front row seat. This is Maitland on Movies, horror double feature. On tonight's agenda, two movies that rip down the wall of sleep, leaving nothing between you and your nightmares. So, I hear that you were just in an advanced screening, Maitland.
Yes, I was in an advanced screening of a movie called Somnium, and as you can probably tell by the how that word sounds, has a great deal to do with sleep and with the not good versions of sleep. And the good versions of sleep obviously being you go to bed, you put your head down, you wake up refreshed in the morning and ready to face your day. I understand it does. Other people have said so. I, on the other hand, I'm prone to waking up, and plus I have a cat who sometimes decides in the middle of the night it's time to come and lie on your legs. And although he's not a bobcat or anything, he's just a little house cat. It's a little startling and it'll wake me up. But hey, he's a sweet boy, so you put up with it from a very sweet cat like him.
So tell me about the movie.
Somnium, again, as the name suggests, has to do with sleep. And specifically, it's set in a sleep clinic that is designed to help people to get ahead in the world by manifesting, as they call it, their dreams and their desires. Who did not see that could go very, very wrong? Yeah, because the thing about sleep is that even for people who have little things that they say before they go to sleep to themselves, like you're going to have a good, calm sleep, you'll wake up refreshed in the morning, things like that. Dreams are not so much under your control as you might like them to be. And sometimes dreams go to really bad places. Sometimes they're scary places, the kind of nightmares where people wake up gasping and don't want to go back to sleep. Sometimes they just go to places that are a little bit uncomfortable for them, and they would prefer not to be having that dream. They dredge up memories that you'd rather leave where you thought you'd put them in the forget pile, but they come creeping back. So sleep can be problematic. And the idea that it's all about you're going to go to bed tired and fed up, and you're going to wake up fresh as a newly opened daisy and ready to face the day is not always the case. Somnium is a movie where people are going to a sleep clinic specifically to work through problems that are in one way or another hindering them in their day-to-day lives. And they are put into a sleep form in which they are encouraged to manifest their nightmares. Nothing could go wrong with that, right? Yeah.
So, overall effect, good quality movie, well directed, well acted. Is there anything that stood out that's not too spoilerific that you can tell us about?
What stood out for it in it for me was that it comes from the place of oblivious science that we often see in movies, horror movies in particular, in which people do things that you feel as though had they thought them through thoroughly, particularly given that there are often people who run clinics, institutes, health programs, whatever. So they're presumably smart people with educations who are used to having to think about things. You'd think that they might think an idea like, I'm going to help people manifest their nightmares, might not be a terrific idea. And indeed, it's not. It turns into an absolute disaster of people being terrorized by what's going on in their own minds that now isn't staying there. And the main character in this movie is somebody who is not even part of this program. She's just a young woman. She's looking for part-time work, and she's looking for work that will allow her time to continue her education. Something that I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with. I certainly had a lot of part-time jobs while I was continuing my education to help pay for them and to pay for where I was living and to pay for stuff. So she is completely not aware of what's going on at Somnium, because all they really tell her is these people have been put into a deep sleep that's going to help them to be able to think more constructively when they're awake about the things that are troubling them, the things that brought them to a doctor or to a psychiatrist who is also a doctor, or to a therapist who is not a medical doctor. It's going to help them work through it. It doesn't work out that way, let's just say. Yeah.
Now, I know when you'd mentioned you were going to go see this, there was another movie that had come to mind. There's something else that you'd wanted to discuss relative to dreams and sleep.
Absolutely. And this is a movie that I think it's easier to discuss more thoroughly because it's not a new movie. And I think that anybody who cares, and probably a lot of people who don't, know what this movie is. And it's Nightmare on Elm Street. That's a movie I'm sure you've seen. I mean, do you have vivid memories of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
3, 4, better lock your door. Yeah. And so on. Yeah. And that childish little chant, which has 2 more little verses, is such a flashback to all those little chants that, kids knew when they were kids. They were just things. Either you use them to torment other kids, or sometimes I guess they were soothing. But I think kids like compactness in that way. They like things that they can grab hold of that aren't too complicated and that they can repeat and use as they see fit, whether they use it to torment other kids or whether they use it to just maybe calm themselves down a little bit when they're upset. And it is, I think, one of the many reasons that movie was so successful, because everybody could identify with that, just as pretty much everybody can identify with nightmares. I'm sure there are people someplace who really do live in an eternal sunshine when they're asleep. I don't think that's most of us. Would you agree?
From my own personal experience, I would say that's not how it works.
No, it's not how it works, because the thing about dreams is that they are your mind unfettered. It's still your mind. It's still your experiences and your thoughts and your feelings. But when we're awake, we have a fair amount of conscious control over certainly what we're thinking and generally what we're saying, which is a direct result of what we're thinking. When you're asleep, it's like you just let all the dogs out and they're going to do what they want to do, and you can like it or not like it, but you're there with all the dogs running wild.
I've heard the phrase that your immediate reaction to something very often is your trained response. Your second reaction is your real response. And in sleep, the training kind of falls away.
Yep, it completely falls away. And yeah, your real response is right up there in front of you, which I suppose is the kind of way you would describe it if you're somebody who spends a lot of time at the movies. It is like the movie that's playing in your head, and you are both watching it and being in it. And again, the only good thing about that is that with a certain amount of practice, you can at the very least teach yourself to wake up when you don't like what you're dreaming. And some people apparently are very successful at actually making their dreams go the way they would like them to. I kind of feel as though maybe those are a lot of people who are not in very deep sleep. So a little bit of your consciousness, their conscious mind thinking, is still operational, and you can grab it and just say, I hate this dream. Make it go someplace else, someplace that is not going to have me wake up in a sweat and then be up from 2 o'clock in the morning until I have to go to work or to school or wherever you have to go, sleep deprived and still thinking about your really horrible dream. Nightmare on Elm Street taps into that in a wonderful way, because your really horrible dream is actually there. It's real. And Freddy and his finger knives, which are, that glove is one of the great conceptions in horror movie weapons. I mean, all of us who have seen a lot of horror movies and a lot of thrillers have seen a lot of weapons wielded in a lot of ways, and a lot of them are knife or knife related, knives, swords, anything that you can carve people up with. Yeah, horror, you've seen them in horror movies. One of the things that you see, I think, in more recent horror movies, because they're built on the fact that by this time, people have seen a lot of horror movies. Starting in the silent era, there were horror movies. Once sound came in and you could hear people screaming, oh, so much the better. That just made the horror movie ground broader and I think more immediate and disturbing for people. So horror movies and their conventions play a really big part, I think, in a lot of people's dreams and a lot of people's nightmares, the nightmares particularly. And what's great about Somnium is that Somnium personalizes them. That's the entire concept of this clinic, that not only are you supposed to deal with your dreams, it's your very personal dreams. I think everybody's had sort of generic dreams, like you were going someplace and you got lost. We've all had that dream, right? We've all had that dream where we forgot something really important on the way to someplace where it really mattered. Those are anxiety dreams. And they have their own purpose because you're kind of working through things that make you anxious when you're awake. But in your dreams, you maybe could do something about it. And if you can't do anything else about it, you can wake up.
Which kind of brings you to Dream Warriors, which was an attempt in the Elm Street franchise to talk about the idea of manifesting all the things you can do because physics doesn't apply, because the normal laws don't apply, because your actual physiology doesn't have to come with you into your dreams.
Exactly. Only your mind is there in your dreams and whatever is in there. And for some people, there's a big box of things that are in your mind that you want to keep shut. But a very compelling argument goes, it's actually good if you can try to deal with them in your dreams rather than deal with all of them in real life. I would like to kill my boss. Better you deal with that in your dreams than go to work every day thinking, I would like to kill that person so much. I hate that person so much. That person's voice makes me want to pick up the nearest heavy object. I have worked with one person like that. And it makes for a very, very stressful working environment. And the advice, well, why don't you just get another job? Well, sometimes that's perfectly good advice, and you can go get another job. Sometimes, for all kinds of reasons, you're stuck with that job. That's what a lot of life is, right? A lot of life is there are things that it would be great if you could change them, but you're stuck with them, at least for the time being. If you're going to make them go away, it's going to be a process that may take a long time. It actually may be relatively quick, and all of it requires you to really consciously do it. In dreams, the only thing you have to consciously do is get your mind working and tell it to get rid of Freddy Krueger, for example.
Yeah. Nightmares is therapy. And if my boss is watching, I like you very much, and I have never had those dreams. I'm sorry, you were saying.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And dream logic, which is a term, is not everyday logic. So on the one hand, that's incredibly freeing. On the other hand, it's chaotic. I mean, how many of us would really know what to do if the world were such that we could make anything happen anytime, anywhere, no matter what, and then multiply that by the number of people on this earth? How's that going to go?
So with all the themes we're talking about, which ones do you feel were effectively talked about in these two movies? Which ones are things you'd love to see another movie cover or remind you of a different movie?
The thing that I think is really good about Somnium is that, first of all, Somnium did remind me a little bit of Coma, which is another movie, a much older movie that works with that idea of people who are being, in this case, kept asleep for a very long time, not necessarily for just the time that they are there for this therapeutic practice, but that also absolutely delves into the idea of, well, what happens exactly when you have that many people asleep, and also that many people dealing with them, because you can't just leave people who are asleep lying in beds, or in the case of coma, and this is one of coma's greatest images, hanging from the ceilings in these carefully designed harnesses. So not only are they in a mental limbo, they're actually in a physical limbo. They're not walking, they're not lying in bed, they're just hanging in this clinic. It's an image that really does haunt me to this day. And Coma, not a new movie, I can't believe I can't remember the year. I believe we were talking 1980s for Coma. Okay, that's a good way back. And still, I can see the picture that was used most of the publicity in that movie right now, right in front of me, because it is so nightmarish. At least in Somnium, they're sleeping in sort of sleep bed pods. I mean, it's slightly less freakishly disturbing. Nonetheless, this manifesting of dreams in Somnium goes very much the wrong way. I don't want to completely ruin this movie.
Oh, no, please don't.
See it, which is why I'm not going to describe precisely how it all goes. But it doesn't go the right way. It doesn't go the way it's intended. And hey, that's why it's a horror thriller movie, because things don't go right.
So then I guess we should cap this off with Nightmare on Elm Street. Big thumbs up.
Huge thumbs up for Nightmare of Elm Street, on Elm Street, the first movie. The Nightmare franchise became, I think, very problematic. And I'm not the only person who thought that. Wes Craven thought that very, very clearly. He at one point described what Freddy had become as the Henny Youngman of horror. All he did was show up at crack wise and maybe wave his gloved hand around a little bit to make sure that you saw the finger knives. And he was right. You could not take the later Freddy seriously. You just couldn't. He was always, and it was always bad puns, just terrible puns about whatever awful thing he either had done or was about to do.
I'm very confused. You've described sleep as good and puns as bad, and neither of these are my experience.
I don't like puns, frankly. I'm just not a punny person. Occasionally there are really clever ones, but there's a lot of seriously, from my point of view, to puns. They are not, to my mind, the highest form of humor.
Yes.
And so once Freddy descended to one pun after another while clicking the finger knives and tipping his hat, I just kind of had enough of it. It didn't stop me watching them. I stayed with the series because I felt like I had to. If I'm somebody who wants to say, I have a great deal of knowledge about horror movies, I can't really ignore an enormous franchise, a franchise that even people who don't completely love all horror movies often got hooked on. And a lot of times what they loved was Freddy. They thought Freddy was great, not the Henny Youngman of horror.
Yes. There are certain transitionals. There are people who know nothing about basketball, but there's 4 or 5 basketball players whose names they've heard. There are people who know nothing about rap. There's 4 or 5 rap musicians. They know their catalog, or at least some of their catalog. And this is one of those kind of things. What I frequently mention to people is my mom will tell you, oh, I don't like fantasy. What's your favorite movie, Mom? Wizard of Oz. Certain things just are transitional that way. They move out of category very comfortably.
Yeah, they are. And absolutely things that hit every note of the kind of thing they are. How can you not at least respect them, even if you don't love them? You have to look at them and say, wow, that works. That works. It's not something I love, but I cannot deny that it sets out to do something and it does it perfectly. There aren't a lot of movies of any kind of which you can say that. I think most of us can even look at movies we love and say, I love this, but I wish this thing were different about it.
So let's ask about Somnium. Big thumbs up?
I would give Somnium a big thumbs up. I would not give it a big thumbs up for people who love horror movies and want to see a lot of stuff happening. A lot of stuff does happen in Somnium, but it's a quieter kind of distress that it produces. And it's that distress of places that you normally think of as safe, even if you don't like them. Nobody likes going to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
But overall, if we need to go to a hospital, we assume that it's a safe place to be, which is good because you're lying half naked most of the time. You're wearing one of those awful gowns that tie up the back. So yeah, they're terrible. And you are not surrounded by your things, except for the couple of things that you might have brought with you. And if you were there because you were in an accident, you might not even have the things you would have liked to have with you. You just happen to have what you were carrying when you fell off a curb and hit your head or got hit by a car or whatever. And it's also, hospitals are very disturbing because they're full of noises that are not normal everyday noises. There are a lot of machines functioning all the time that make sounds that if you're in a hospital during the day and there's a lot of busy stuff going on, you probably don't hear. But if you're admitted to a hospital and you're there at night, you suddenly become aware of all kinds of sounds, little beeps, little clicks, little sounds of the air being pumped more intensely or less intensely if you are on, say, a respirator, or you are doing inhalations every couple of hours. All of that stuff makes noise, and it's not the kind of noise that you hear in your everyday life. You're hearing lots of other stuff. If you live in a big city, which I do, yeah, you're hearing sounds all the time. Sounds that people who don't live in really big cities are kept awake by for weeks, frankly. But once you're used to the cars, the street noise, planes going over, because there are several major airports here, and if you happen to be anywhere near where they get into the flight path where they're going to begin descending, you can hear those engines.
Yes.
Dogs. Just
quote Stoker, the children of the night, what music they make. It becomes your music.
Yeah, the night in a big city comes with a lot of music. And some of it is music that if you could change the channel and go to another station, you would go to another station because you're not really loving it right this minute. But you have to deal with it. Not to mention, I happen to live in between two major hospital centers. So ambulance sirens are just a part of my life. I was once doing another podcast with somebody who's based in South Carolina. And I guess it was a bad day. A lot of people had had accidents. And I was quite honestly barely aware of it. But at some point, this person said, "Wow, that's a lot of police cars going outside." I said, "No, they're not police cars. They're ambulances. And they are not all people who are in ambulances because police cars should probably have been involved somewhere with what happened to them. They're just two major hospital centers. And it's a big, big city."
Everyone's got a different scale. I remember sitting with a very shocked friend who just kept staring at me and saying, "I just saw 7 taxi cabs in a row. I just saw 7 taxi cabs. I just saw 7 taxi cabs in a row. I just saw 7 taxi cabs in a row." And he could not stop himself from just getting the emphasis on every syllable and repeating the sentence, because that was just too many taxi cabs for him to see.
And yeah, there are a lot of taxi cabs in New York, no question. I can hear the subway at night where I live. Yeah. And it's underground here. I grew up someplace where the subway was above ground for about 2 stops. And the building I grew up in was right in between them. I heard the number 1 train all night.
Yeah.
And to me as a kid, it was actually very soothing because obviously my ear wasn't right next to the tracks. I had a block of city buildings between me and the subway. And you could just hear it sort of chuck, 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 chucking along.
Chuck agrees with you.
Chuck agreed with me, yeah. And as I said, I can hear it at night too. Even here the subway is actually sub, but there's a great big block of grating.
Yeah.
half a block away from me. So, which is for various reasons. I think part of it is to take the heat out of it at some point for one. But anyway, because of those gratings, you can absolutely hear the train go. And as people who don't live in New York might not realize, they run 24/7, 365.
Yes.
Which is great. That's why we love them. You know, to me, it was incomprehensible the first time I was in a city where the subway cut off at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, how do people work at night?
There are cities where the sidewalk rolls up at 9 o'clock. I remember being in Florida doing a training class one time, and I literally had to make my lunch break my dinner break because otherwise nothing would be open in the evening for me to eat at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, and you can either be the asshole big city person who says, oh, this is just awful. How do people live this way? Or you can be the person who says, okay, this is fine for some people. This would not be fine for me. And where I live is great for me. Other people don't want to live that way. They can't get used to that noise. You know, if you move here when you grew up someplace where that noise was not part of just the background of what people call the hum of the city, which sounds much gentler than it sometimes is. The hum of the city does include ambulance sirens, but you just get used to it. It's part of the music of the place where you live. And dead silent suburbs.
Yeah.
I swear I'm waiting to hear the smiler with the knife creeping up someplace. So
I think that's a perfect place to stop. And we will hopefully see all of you nice folks next week on our next episode. Thank you.
Look forward to it.
On behalf of Maitland McDonough and myself, Charles Baruch, we wish you nothing but happy dreams.